Live from State College, this is Nittany Talk. I'm your host, Danny Vitale, and today we'll be discussing the latest political news, pay a special tribute to a beloved actor, discuss a college scandal that shocked the nation, and debate our favorite Thanksgiving foods. Now, let's get to talking. Welcome back to Nittany Talk. Now we're going to send it over to our political panel to discuss the future of America after recent changes have been made to the House of Representatives, as well as a new public announcement on the presidential election. Over to you, Francie.
Thanks, Danny. I'm Francie Ebert alongside Olivia Jean, Ryan Lowy, Jay Sobardo, and Yaya One. We are seeing a major shift in political positions as there is a newly elected Speaker of the House in office. Speaking of shifts, Mike Pence has announced he will be dropping out of the 2024 presidential election. All of these changes raise the question of what the future of the United States holds. With that being said, do you think the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is qualified and ready for this position, Yaya?
I will definitely say in terms of his qualifications, he is part of what they call the Gang of Eight, so he's very high in terms of intelligence and what gets passed down from the White House, so no doubts about his qualifications. Something that has been swirling around his recent election to the House Speaker is actually his use of this accountability software called Covenant Eyes, and what that is, to break it down or to risk oversimplifying it, is he and his son are accountability partners, and so they hold each other accountable to make sure neither of them is consuming explicit material on the internet. Why is this important to his position as Speaker of the House? Because this software screens every single thing that they've ever looked at on their Wi-Fi, on every device that they have. So this has raised questions from the opposition as to how secure documents from the Senate are going to be if he maybe uses them on his home computer, if he accesses them through his home Wi-Fi, and how his use of this software is going to be maybe affecting that. Now, a representative from his office has said that he only accesses these kinds of files from the safety of the Capitol itself. So reassuring us that there's not much to worry about in that regard. However, it is still a little shaky and could potentially be used as ammunition from the opposition to maybe delegitimize him as a House Speaker.
Well, I'm not a huge fan of his qualifications because when he ran for the Louisiana House of Representatives, he ran unopposed. And then in one of his 3 terms, which was the most recent one, he ran unopposed in the U.S. Senate. Excuse me, not in the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives. That concerns me a little bit because that doesn't really force him to give the beliefs to the people that he represents in Louisiana's 4th Congressional District. And actually, a lot of people within his own district have expressed concerns since he ran unelected on some of the things that he has said and some of the things he has done, pardon me. And that includes his stances on the LGBTQ community, his opinions on climate change, him getting along with other people within and not within his own party. When you run unopposed, and no matter at what level, it's quite concerning.
Yeah. Oh, you done?
I am.
Okay. So I think he's qualified. I would like to think anyone who's in Congress or in the House is qualified.
Be careful with that. Be careful with that.
Not everyone is. I'd like to think everyone is, but obviously
We'd
they're
like
not.
to hope.
Yeah. But I think he was in a position of power in the House. I forget what his title was. He might have been like the majority whip or something like that. Correct me if I'm
That's
wrong.
correct. You're correct.
But I'm glad the House was able to rally around someone, at least the Republicans in the House were able to, because after, voting on 5 people, I think people were just sick of it, and that's who we landed on. I just hope he is extreme, but I hope he's able to become a little bit more moderate with his views and get some legislation passed through on both sides.
Yeah, I was quite surprised to see how fast the House came up with a decision for the Speaker. I mean, it felt like forever we were waiting around trying to figure out who's going to be the next Speaker, who's the next candidate for Speaker, and just one day we kind of woke up and we had a new Speaker. It felt like that to me. But speaking of the new Speaker, he is probably the most far-right Speaker we've seen in the House so far. He was one of the people who rejected the Electoral College votes after January 6th, and he objected the 2020 results, which really scares me to have someone like that with a lot of power in his position have those sort of views. So I'm quite nervous for this, to be
And
honest.
you have to ask ourselves if it was really about his qualifications and his stances, or if people were just ready for a new House so that things can get moving. Because like you said, it feels like we just woke up and it was like there was not a lot of deliberation. So I have to wonder if it was just a rushed move on.
And
Congress's
he had a very low public profile. Not many people knew who he was. So I think when we all woke up and we saw this news, we were, to say the least, quite surprised.
Well, he's considered I believe people call him a deep-eyed conservative, very heavy Trumper. He's the 56th Speaker of the U.S. House in the 118th Congress. I'm a little concerned about some stuff he said when he was interviewed by Sean Hannity a couple days ago, and he said he wants to pack a lot of different things together that really should not be together in bills. And that's something I don't love to hear, but he did say, give me a chance, and I'm a fan of giving him a chance.
Mm-hmm. I think you guys talked about this last week. I think it comes down to transparency as well. I mean, he is someone in his position is, as you stated, Olivia, I feel like this was kind of an overnight kind of thing. It happened kind of suddenly, and his position is extremely crucial. And I think what's going to make that whole everything work is transparency. Speaking of transparency, Mike Pence was very transparent in dropping out of the presidential election.
He's so transparent, can't even see him
No,
in the race.
where do we think that puts other candidates at right now?
Well, I think, again, the situation was that Mike Pence was not really catering to a very large market to begin with. He admitted that himself, but I really don't think it's going to change anything. When Chris Christie took the stage a couple weeks ago, he said, your love for Trump is reprehensible. Everyone's a fan of Trump in the Republican Party right now, who at one point thought he had a chance, now still believe that he has a chance. He holds a humongous lead. It's been growing, and the more people that drop out, the more people like Christie and all that get booed for challenging him.
I just think I don't think everyone in the Republican Party is a fan of Trump.
Yeah, not everyone. I apologize. Not necessarily everybody. Oh, threw my pen there. Excuse me. I'm getting a little aggressive today. But no, what I was saying was that people who were, thinking about voting for Trump or not are now almost really just falling on him and saying this is our only choice.
Well, I'd like to see more of the people who aren't polling as high, like Vivek Ramaswamy. He's polling at 5.8%.
Just fell behind a little bit.
Doug Burgum and Asa Hutchinson. They're not polling very high. So right now, even Chris Christie, he's not polling very high at all. So right now we're down to Trump, who's polling at like 56% or something like that. Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. I think if they really want to beat Trump, then everyone else kind of needs to drop out and rally around either Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis. I'd like it to be Nikki Haley, but
and again,
we'll see.
One thing I'm noticing too was that it's not necessarily that Trump is, bringing in all of these new voters. It's almost that as people like Pence drop out, or people who have to consider dropping out because they're not qualifying, like Asa Hutchinson, people are going, well, Trump has the chance to put the conservatives back on the map in executive office. It's a situation like that. And what I'm really curious to see is who his vice president is going to be.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. I think Pence was he was really suffering at that point. I mean, he was polling at 4%. He was in debt over $500,000. Like, he was not doing well. But I think that also is because people didn't really understand where he stood in a lot of topics and a lot of issues, because he wouldn't explicitly say a lot of things. So I think that left a lot of people confused, and unfortunately, that's how he lost supporters.
Right, and I think because normally a vice president running for president would be a pretty strong contender, you would think, because they already have experience in the White House working directly with the president. However, a lot of people see Mike Pence just as being Trump's lapdog in a sense. So they don't really have a strong sense of what his personality is and who he is and how he would operate as a president away from Trump. They can't really separate Mike Pence from Trump. It's like peanut butter and jelly. You can't have one if you don't have the
And
other.
I think the big thing he banked on running on was the fact that he was the one who kind of upheld the results of the election and was like, no, we didn't win, Joe Biden won. And I think that was the big thing that he tried to run on, but obviously didn't.
Yeah, and another thing too that I noticed was that he went from denying some like stuff that Trump has said and Trump has done to all of a sudden giving himself credit for things that the Trump administration had did. He didn't really make it clear like what he liked that happened in the Trump administration and what he didn't like. He basically just, kind of like threw a little mesh in there of, I don't know what I want to take credit for and what I want to say was all Trump. And that I think really hurt him.
Well, thank you guys. That is all the time we have for today. Back to you, Danny.
Thank you, Francie. We will be right back to pay a tribute to a legendary pop culture icon. Stay tuned.
People still love him. A lot of people get disowned for, going through something like that, but he didn't. And that shows how much of a loving and genuine person he is, because everyone in the public, his family members, his friends, all stuck with him to the very end.
Welcome back to Nittany Talk. Beloved Friends star Matthew Perry's death has shocked the nation since October 28th. Today, we pay a special tribute to Perry and acknowledge his impact both on and off the camera. Over to you, Eva.
Thanks, Danny. I'm Eva Hines, joined here today by Jackson Tortone, Molly Goebel, and Kate Delmonico. As most of us have heard by now, we lost beloved actor Matthew Perry on October 28th. Matthew brought joy to so many hearts beyond his appearance and many iconic roles. Today, we are going to give a tribute to Perry and talk about a few of his accomplishments and the legacy he has left behind. So, as we all know, Matthew was a very established actor. He had a very successful career, obviously with Friends. He's been in a lot of feature films, and he's even done some guest appearances in shows like 90210, The Odd Couple. So I want to ask you guys, what is your favorite accomplishment that Perry has done? I'll start with you, Jackson.
So obviously Friends was his main show that most people know him for. But one movie that he was in that I really enjoyed as a kid, and even still today, was 17 Again. It was a really funny movie where he played the older version of Zac Efron, and he went back and forth between him, him playing this high school character, or his soul basically, and then his adult self. And I just thought it was a really cute and funny movie. And it's something that really shows his character as a very compassionate, romantic person, and how he is in real life.
For sure.
I really like Fools Rush In. He plays Alex along with Salma Hayek, and he's a Wall Street employee, kind of Top Gun in his company, and he moves to Vegas, has a fling with Salma Hayek, and she falls pregnant. He says, this isn't the life for me, but eventually they fall in love. He realizes, I am meant to be a dad. I want to spend my life with you, even though there's cultural differences as well as religion differences. And we just see his character grow throughout the movie, and I think it just shows a great range of who Matthew Perry was.
For sure.
I think he had a wonderful career. Those were some great films that he was in, but I know for many people like myself, my first impression of him was from the iconic character of Chandler Bing on Friends. That was a comfort show to many. I think that really grew his fan base, and I was thinking about it the other day about what some of my favorite Chandler Bing moments, and I do have to say, I think the one where everybody finds out, that was a great episode where everyone did ultimately find out about the romance between him and Monica, and that was a huge turning point for his character and his character development for the rest of the show. And that's definitely one of my favorite episodes, as I'm a big Chandler and Monica fan myself. But what about you guys? What are your favorite Chandler Bing episodes in Friends?
Yeah, I love that episode as well, a very iconic one. For me, I love the one with the embryos. It's basically where Chandler and Joey and Monica and Rachel compete on a game show type thing, and they are competing for the apartment. So they're playing this game, and the question Rachel loses on is actually about Chandler's job. No one knows what he does. It's a big joke in the show. And when Rachel can't remember, they end up having to switch apartments. And if you know Friends, Rachel and Monica have the nicer apartment. So I think that's a show or an episode where Chandler really lets his funny side through. So I really like that one.
So for my favorite Friends episode, I gotta go with the one where Chandler takes a bath. Just a hilarious episode. I think everyone's seen at least a clip of that scene where him and Monica are in the bathtub and they're taking it together, and she has to go underneath the water because Joey comes into the room, and he's trying to get him to order chicken and all this stupid stuff, and he ends up pulling him back in the room, you know what, I want some chicken. Just he went back under, and I just think that was a really funny scene and a funny episode.
Okay, so I have to highlight two. The first one is the season 6 Thanksgiving when Monica's parents come to town, and no one can know that she and Chandler are living together. So everyone's trying to step on each other's toes until they think that Chandler did drugs at their home, which he didn't. Turns out it was Ross. So everyone's kind of just revealing everyone's secrets, but in the end, they love Chandler for who he is, and it's just important that he made Monica happy. And then the season 6 finale is when he proposes to Monica, and it really threw her off because he kind of made it look like he didn't really want commitment throughout most of the beginning of the show, and then he raced around to find her so he could propose to her, and then she ended up trying to propose to him. And he changed his perception on love just for her, and they're the greatest love story in TV. So
I completely agree. Friends was super iconic, my favorite show. So to talk about Matthew's later career, in 2022, he did write an autobiography. It was titled Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Things, where he talked about his time on Friends, his personal relationships, and then most importantly, his struggle with addiction. He struggled with alcohol and drug abuse. And he kind of talks about how he was able to get to a point of being clean and being healthier in that book. And I think it really goes to show people how they can get through hard times, and people who struggle with similar things, like Matthew, can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, it really shows that, like, how he was able to go through all that alcohol, Vicodin abuse, and people still love him. A lot of people get disowned for, going through something like that, but he didn't. And that shows how much of a loving and genuine person he is, because everyone in the public, his family members, his friends, all stuck with him to the very end. And it shows just how great of a human being he really was.
Yeah, I know that in part of the book he mentioned when there were interventions of his habits, and it really showed that everyone wanted him to get help. They showed their support, and he was in a rehab for many years of his life, but in the end he was sober. And I think it's just an amazing example of that no matter where you are in your life, that it does get better. People are there to support you.
Yeah, for sure. So to kind of wrap up, I just wanted to kind of talk about the legacy he's going to leave with everyone here. I know for me personally, he's been a really big comfort character in my life, so I know whenever I'm having a bad day, I can turn on an episode of Friends and get a nice laugh in, or just be reminded about all the great work he's done. So what has he kind of left you guys with?
I have to agree with that. Friends was a huge comfort show for me, and I know I still go back to it every now and then when I have a bad day, and I will still turn on, and it won't be the same now that he's gone, but Chandler Bing will always feel like a personal friend of mine. So.
I completely agree.
I think he's a great role model for everyone, men and women, just as a human being and as an actor and everything.
Yeah, Friends kind of feels like part of our family. I grew up watching it with my family, and anytime I see them, Friends always comes up, our favorite episodes. What we always talk about Chandler because he's just been such a big part of our lives. So when I think about that, I just feel like the legacy he left on us.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. That is all the time we have for today. Matthew Perry will forever hold a special place in so many people's hearts. And I think it's safe to say that he will always be remembered for his positive contributions. Back to you, Danny.
Thank you, Eva. You are totally right. Perry will be remembered as an entertainment legend forever. We will be right back.
Was he was very good at covering his tracks. He was not caught because of what he did. He was caught because somebody else spoke up in regards to a different situation.
Welcome back to Nittany Talk. Everyone knows how difficult and stressful applying to colleges can be. Deciding where to go, writing all the essays, it's truly a hassle. But what happens when people cheat their way into not just any colleges, but some of the top universities in the country? Let's send it over to Ryan Lowy to discuss Operation Varsity Blues.
Thanks, Mr. Vitale. I'm Ryan Lowy, joined today by Sam Rascio, Katie Schreider, and Eva Hines. Welcome back to Crime Reviews. Today we will circle our attention towards a recently concluded investigation and series of prosecutions related to the actions of Rick Singer, a former NCAA basketball coach turned college counselor, who made national news after it was discovered that he created what he called a side door to get some of America's wealthiest children into elite colleges and universities. Singer is one of more than 50 individuals found guilty of charges including wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. Other famous individuals who faced federal consequences for their involvement in this massive undertaking dubbed Operation Varsity Blues are Lori Loughlin and her daughter Olivia Jade, Douglas M. Hodge, Diane and Todd Lake, and many others. A years-long undertaking that was upended by the FBI in 2019, Rick Singer, the alleged mastermind behind this series of related crimes, is now behind bars after he was sentenced to 3.5 years in January of 2023. Woo, okay, now let's get into things. Sam Rashio is now going to talk about what a side door is and how Rick Singer used it to get many different individuals into college illegally.
Right. The side door were parents made donations to Rick Singer to hide the bribes that they were sending to these colleges, and Rick Singer kind of got the kids in a side way. For example, he would Photoshop their heads onto professional athletes, things like that. The back door is paying thousands or millions of dollars to, example, Harvard, Yale, big name colleges to get the kids in, and the front door, as we all know, because we all did it, is getting into college the regular way.
For sure. Now let's talk about some notable names in this case. We have a lot of rich and wealthy parents involved. So first I want to talk about Lori Loughlin. She is from Full House, and her daughter's Olivia Jade, who we'll get into later. And she served 11 days in jail, and her husband spent $500,000 to get their 2 daughters into USC as rowers. We also have Felicity Huffman. Like Lori, she spent 11 days in jail, and she paid $15,000 to help get help on the SAT exam. And then we have Douglas M. Hodge. He actually had the harshest punishment out of all the parents by serving 9 months in jail. And basically, he got 4 out of the 7 of his kids into college using this method. He was working on getting the 5th in, but the crime broke before he could do that. And to end, we have Diane and Todd Blake. They worked on a retail thing, and they ended up bribing USC to get their kids in as a volleyball recruit. And they actually, when they were interviewed, could not remember what fake sport they had their kids play. I think he said they thought it was basketball, but it actually ended up being volleyball.
Tell us a little bit about Rick Singer.
Well, Rick Singer, so he started out his own college experience at a community college, but then ended up transferring. He ended up going on to be an NCAA coach, and then all of a sudden he was a college counselor, advisor. So it's definitely a twist. You don't expect an NCAA coach to become a college advisor. And he is now in jail for 3.5 years, and he had to pay a $14 million restitution for this whole case.
What I found the most interesting was for years he was just walking the streets after the crime. He was seen swimming. He was seen saying certain things. He was seen ignoring the media. He's a very interesting character in terms of the way he behaved. Individuals who coached with him said he wasn't necessarily the nicest and most calmed and relaxed individual. And he's very clever. As we spoke about earlier, his ex-girlfriend described him as very private. He was not out there. Many people didn't know about him, but also very intelligent. As you said, it was a very weird switch for him to all of a sudden go from a college basketball coach to a college counselor who dressed like a college basketball coach. And he was very interesting. He was very behind closed doors. That's why it was very hard to discover him. But what I found the most interesting was he was very good at covering his tracks. He was not caught because of what he did. He was caught because somebody else spoke up in regards to a different situation, which I think is the craziest part. So does anybody want to talk about certain individuals in the case who were involved? I'm really interested in Olivia Jade, if anyone wants to talk about her.
I will gladly talk about her because I was a subscriber of her before all of this broke.
Did you press the button? Did you unsubscribe?
I did unsubscribe. I have now unsubscribed. But I grew up watching Full House, and then all of a sudden I found Olivia Jade. I thought she was great. I loved her content, but in multiple of her YouTube videos, she talked about how much she hated school. It's seen in the documentary on Netflix, videos of her talking about how she hated being there, she didn't want to be a part of it, but she was grateful for having an education. And this was after she had announced she had gotten into USC. So it's like, if you're furthering your education, but you hate it so much, why are you doing this? Why are you taking a spot from someone else?
I know. It's kind of like she almost did it for show a little bit. She had a really big following on YouTube. And I know a lot of people looked up to her. And it's kind of almost like she wanted to show, look, I got into this university, I got into this school, even though we know it wasn't for the right reasons.
And another thing with that is her guidance counselor was very suspicious of her getting into USC. He called the university to say, how did the student get into USC? Her grades are not up to par. She doesn't show up to school all the time. How in the world would she get into USC?
Yeah. She wasn't even on the rowing team, and she went for rowing. So it's like, It just makes sense.
One thing I think that Netflix reasonably neglected to mention was the fact that the evolution of technology, AI, and all that, it really did its damage in this case because Photoshop was really what put these individuals on rowing teams, what put these individuals on water polo teams. I mean, guys, let's be honest, these were not athletic people. These people had zero interest in high school or college sports. Yeah, no. It was a wild situation all around. So many different things happened. As I said, I believe the number was 57, but we're going to say, just to be safe, over 50 individuals. So you talked about the person who faced the biggest punishment. Let's talk about somebody that I think was very interesting throughout the entire thing. Gordy Ernst. He was not mentioned in the documentary, but he was the tennis coach for Georgetown University. And, well, let's just say he had himself not so fun of a time in this case.
No. And he even sued to not, or threatened to sue not to be on the documentary, which is not why he's seen in the Netflix documentary.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I think is so interesting is Rick Singer was so willing to just let this happen, to have someone portray him in this documentary, while you have this coach who is doing the exact opposite. He didn't want to be involved in it in any way. Like, he's trying to erase what happened with him.
Pled not guilty.
And Rick Singer was so involved in the investigation of this case, he let the FBI put a little camera on his chest when he spoke to people who was planning like the college admissions process. They wiretapped his phone calls, which they wiretapped his phone calls when he didn't know about it, but then they also wiretapped his phone calls when he did know about it to catch some of the individuals that were also involved in the scheme. So he created it, but he also helped solve his own case, which was also really interesting.
I know, I think it's really important to show how Rick Singer was so cooperative with FBI. I mean, you know, he worked with these families and parents for so long, and then just when he got caught, he was so easy to be like, I'll do whatever you need. I'll film the meetings, I'll tap the calls, and I think that's really shows a lot about his character.
Yeah, related individuals similar to Gordy Ernst, who was mentioned in the documentary, was Rudy Meredith, but there was another coach that I think had a very interesting time. Mr. Vandemoer, the sailing coach, he bared the brunt of the case in a pretty bad way. And some felt bad for him, some felt he should have faced a punishment, but the way they portrayed him in the documentary, you really do have to feel bad for him. As he said, you know, he was embarrassed by the media. Not only that, he was fired, and that was his only income for the family. It was a terrible situation. I think it was very nice of the judge to grant him no time behind bars. I think it was very respectful and the right thing to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, he said in the documentary he had to plead guilty because he really had no evidence on his side. I mean, Rick Singer wasn't going to testify against him. Stanford wasn't going to testify against him. And I think it's unfortunate. I mean, like you said, he lost his job, he lost his house, he lost so much, and I mean, now he's a felon for life. So I think it really gave him some time to reflect and think about that.
Keynote, he was the only coach who did not personally profit, or at least there's no record of it.
Yes.
Well, with that being said, that's all we have for today. And when I say we can talk about these cases for hours, I think this one we can talk about for years upon years. That's why it took so long for the final sentences to be brought down. But institutions such as Georgetown, Stanford, UCLA, USD, UT Austin, Wake Forest, and Yale are all today still known as some of the most prestigious institutions of higher education in the world. Could this change anything? Is the college admissions process still fair? Should these schools have faced more consequences for their employees' involvement in the process? Let us know in the comments below. Now, back to you, Danny.
Thank you, Ryan. My younger brother is actually applying to colleges right now, and I know he'd be so upset if he learned someone cheated their way in instead of writing their essays like he is. We will be right back to discuss the best and worst Thanksgiving foods.
Our next food, stuffing. I am a hater. I am a full-blown stuffing hater.
I hate it.
I don't understand. It's just bread and seasoning and...
Welcome back to Nittany Talk. The GOAT of Thanksgiving foods has been a debate for as long as time. Is turkey really the star of the show? Should potatoes be sweet? Why is cranberry sauce even a thing? Now we're going to send it over to Joy Donald to discuss overrated and underrated Thanksgiving foods. Take it away, Joy.
Thanks, Danny. Thanksgiving is coming up, and I can safely say there are tons of takes on the classic Thanksgiving dishes. Are you a savory food lover that values turkey, mac and cheese, and mashed potatoes? Or do you like the sweet goodness of a cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, and pumpkin pie? Keep watching to find out what Jordan Spagnoli, Neil Azami, Kate Schreiner, and I opinions are on Thanksgiving menu items.
So, turkey. I feel like that's a pretty, that's where you have to start.
Yeah.
I personally, I don't think it's underrated. I don't think it's overrated. I think it gets, the recognition it deserves. I mean, when you think of Thanksgiving, you think of turkey.
Right. I think it's so dependent on how it's made. Because if you get a dry turkey, it's not as good. So you just need someone who is actually able to prepare it correctly. And I know my dad personally, he does deep fried turkey that's just like super buttery and garlicky, and it's perfect.
I agree. I feel like this topic can get sometimes offensive to whoever's cooking it because it really changes every time. Like, obviously, I love turkey, but there's just sometimes when it's my least favorite item in the Thanksgiving meal, and I'm like, I don't even want to eat this right now. So very dependent on who cooks it.
Right.
Yeah, I really have to agree. Honestly, in my opinion, every single time I get a turkey, it's either dry or it's too watery, and the flavor, it kind of just boils down and not too good, and it gets really like tangy and just not good in the oven.
Tangy,
But yeah, I don't know what's wrong with my turkeys, but it's like a little
turkey.
But I will say the skin is always really good. It's like it's crispy, but the inside is really what just it doesn't do it for me.
So are we going overrated, underrated, or rated correctly? I'm saying rated correctly.
I would agree.
Okay.
I would say rated correctly, personally.
Yeah, I haven't really heard anyone say they're like a really, really big fan of turkey, so I'll just say it's rated correctly.
So then next, mashed potatoes, my personal favorite.
Okay.
I love them. If you do not have them at Thanksgiving, I will not be showing up.
I think it is so dependent. I love mashed potatoes. I think it's the best thing ever. I think they're so underrated. I don't like gravy. It's like a personal thing. I'm not a gravy person. So if there's gravy on it, I will not be enjoying it. But if it's just some plain mashed potatoes with some garlic in it, then I'm all for it.
So I would have to disagree with you on this one. I think mashed potatoes are kind of very plain. Like, I don't see, I mean, I think it's good. Like, it kind of reminds me of baby food, though. Like, it's just a bit plain. But the gravy, I think, just adds to it. And then you can put the gravy on the turkey, and it's perfect. So, I don't know. I'd have to disagree on that.
I agree with you halfway on there, Nilo. Honestly, the gravy, it really steals the show. But I will say, good mashed potatoes that have a little bit of chives, a little bit of garlic, some good butter on it. It's really good, and I honestly feel like it's really easy to make, too. So you really can't go wrong, at least in my opinion, with mashed potatoes.
I'm definitely saying underrated.
I would agree, underrated.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely underrated for me, too.
Yeah. A little overrated for me.
So then next, sweet potatoes. I feel like there's two ways you could do this.
Right.
Just regular sweet potato or with marshmallows. Either way, I'm not a fan. I do not like them. I will not eat them. I don't like when a food that should be savory to me is sweet. It just kind of throws me off. Therefore, so overrated for me.
Potatoes shouldn't be sweet ever. That is the weirdest concept to me. And on top of that, the thought of marshmallows on potatoes, the consistency, like, that's disgusting to me. That's the worst idea ever.
So I actually love sweet potatoes. Just me being completely different. I really love sweet potatoes. Like, I grew up like eating a bunch of sweet potato fries, so I love them. The thing is, though, I never had it at like Thanksgiving dinner. Like, the way that it's styled with the marshmallows and things like that, I've never had that before. I tried it at a friend's house one time. Really loved it, but I guess just because I never grew up with it like as a Thanksgiving like entree or like dish, I really don't think it's such a big deal to have like in Thanksgiving, but I do think sweet potatoes are good.
Yeah, I really have to agree with that. I've never had sweet potatoes during Thanksgiving, but me personally, I hate when foods that are supposed to be normal food is sweet. I don't understand it. It feels weird in my mouth.
It's not necessary.
Not a fan. Definitely not a fan.
Okay, so then our next food, stuffing. I am a hater. I am a full-blown stuffing hater.
I hate it.
I don't understand. It's just bread and seasoning, and I don't like it. I think it is so overrated. You could get rid of it off the face of the planet, and I am okay with that.
I should have prefaced this by saying I'm the pickiest eater in the world. I don't like it. I think the texture is weird. I don't like that some of the pieces of bread are like crispy and some of them can be like soggy or soft. I hate it so much. I hate it. Ugh, I don't like it.
I just don't see how you feel that way. Like, stuffing is literally my favorite dish in the whole bit. I think it like ties everything together. Maybe it's the way that like right. I think it's maybe the way that like my grandma makes it that I just like have always liked it. But it's not too like soggy or anything. It's like pretty light. I think it just combines like
all the flavors of everything I'm eating kind of together. It's actually like my favorite thing to eat on Thanksgiving.
I have to agree with you too. I hate stuffing. It always has too much seasoning and it has a million flavors, and I strongly dislike it. I cannot stand stuffing.
Just don't understand.
So bad. So overrated.
Underrated. Underrated.
No.
Overrated.
Definitely overrated for me.
Guys,
So then our
what?
next Thanksgiving food that I don't know if I consider this a Thanksgiving food.
I definitely do not.
Mac and cheese. Apparently that's a thing a lot of people have at Thanksgiving. I've never thought that. So for me, I'm like, well, that's kind of overrated. That's not your traditional like turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. That gives Thanksgiving vibes. I mean, I like mac and cheese and I will eat it gladly any day. But as a Thanksgiving food, I don't think it fits the narrative.
I would have to agree. I think I've probably had mac and cheese for Thanksgiving once, and it was just because we had a large group of people, so we needed more food. But like, I don't associate it with this. I associate it with me being in my dorm room at 12 a.m. trying to study and needing some food.
Good point.
I don't think of it as like Thanksgiving at all.
So my mom has always made the mac and cheese for our Thanksgiving dinner. And for a while we didn't have mac and cheese, but then when she started making it, I was like, how can we not have mac and cheese for Thanksgiving? It just doesn't make sense. So now I'm a mac and cheese stan for Thanksgiving. I approve, and I really like it now.
Yeah, definitely me too. Every year my mom makes mac and cheese, and it's so good. And especially done right, it can really be a nice, hearty Thanksgiving food where you put it in the oven and the top is nice and creamy. And it's really just like crunchy, but then the inside is gooey.
So visual,
It's so good.
Yeah.
My mouth is watering as you are describing
You're
it.
really describing this mac and cheese.
Yeah, it's my favorite, honestly.
But yeah, so that's all we really have time for today. But it was great hearing everyone's opinions about the Thanksgiving foods.
Hungry
I know
now.
for sure Thanksgiving season. I am thankful for all of you guys watching Nittany Talk. So back to you, Danny.
Thank you, Jordan. All this talk about food is making me so hungry, so this is actually the perfect time to wrap up this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed watching and learning this week's episode where we spoke about the latest in politics, paid tribute to Matthew Perry, learned about Operation Varsity Blues, and discussed the best and worst Thanksgiving foods. For Nittany Talk, I'm Danny Vitale, and we hope to see you next week.